Hello everyone, and welcome back to Warships Blitz with Terry. I finally get to the ship that's in the Blitz Pass, and this one is an interesting one. This is the Tokachi, a Tier 7 Japanese premium cruiser, but not just any cruiser, because if you're looking at the Japanese line, mainly what you're going to be seeing at Tier 7 are heavy cruisers. And there is the odd light cruiser with the Mogami at Tier 8. But generally, starting, I think, Tier 5 with the Furutaka, the Japanese line is consistent of heavy cruisers. This is not even a light cruiser. This is a scout cruiser. Because this thing actually has 127mm destroyer guns. Now, here comes the thing that starts to slightly irritate me about the ship. Because if we look at the details, it says it is a project to re-equip the Furutaka class with 127mm dual-purpose artillery. Okay, why does that irritate me? Well, first of all, the Furutakas initially were designed to with 200. I think they started out actually with 200mm single gun turrets, and then got bored out to 203mm in the turrets to deal with or to counter the American Omaha class. And these were heavy cruisers. By the time of the Second World War, things were relatively outdated. Now the Japanese have had plans to convert all kinds of outdated equipment into anti-aircraft systems, because they did realize, obviously, not being stupid, that they were being hammered by American aircraft quite a little. And things tended out not to go so well. So the Kuma, for example, is one example where there were plans to refit these as anti-aircraft ships. And there was even a dedicated light cruiser. I think it was called the Oyoda. I'll have to look it up. But these things were actually considered for refits in terms of anti-aircraft duty, and these were considered to have the 127mm dual-purpose guns. Now, these destroyer guns were not great in anti-aircraft duty. They were lacking the automated fire control. They were slow to track. They were manual loaded. So for AA duty, they were suboptimal, which is one reason that the Akizuki actually received the 100mm AA guns for dual purpose, which were quite a bit capable. That said, in all the lists of Japanese cruisers that were considered for refit for AA purposes, I have not managed to find any mention of the Furutaka. So why in the world would you pick the one ship that actually wasn't, by all means, unless I missed it, but wasn't considered, and put that in here instead of taking some of the ships that were actually considered? But anyway, let's get to the ship in the game. Historical nitpicking on the side. As you can see here, she gets a defensive AA2. This is, at first glance, you could say, well, typical Japanese gun layout, a little messy. We've got the two super firing turrets in the front, and then we've got a bunch more turrets scattered all around the ship. You could say, well, it's probably an Atlanta then, is it? So let's take a quick look at and compare the ship to others. Let's begin with the Flint, because the Atlanta actually still has the wing turrets, whereas the Flint is the later iteration, so we have the sort of same setup and number of turrets. The first thing that becomes obvious is that the Tokachi has significantly less utility than the Flint. The Flint's got 2 radars and 3 fuel smokes. But let's have a look. She is actually slightly better armored, which has the annoying side effect that it's just enough armor to ensure that battleship shells get stuck in the ship and explode rather than passing straight through it for 25% damage. So this ship can get deleted by battle if you give broadside to battleships, which is something that's important. Let's keep that in mind for later. Whereas in something like an Atlanta or a Flint, this can happen as well, but you also have a decent chance that if the dispersion is to your benefit, it hits the even more weakly armored side spots and just overpenetrates. She is a little faster than the Flint in typical Japanese fashion, and but has slightly weaker engines. However, while she has a better turn time, and turn time here is an extremely misleading term, because turn time does not mean what you normally think turn time means when you're talking about naval theory. Turn time in game means the time it takes to shift the rudder from one extreme to the other. So if you're hard to port and you're shifting all the way around, then and too hard to starboard, that's the time it takes to make that happen. The interesting factor here is the maximum traverse speed, which is at 6.8 degrees per second, compared to the 9 degrees per second on the Flint. So while the rudder itself shifts slightly faster than it does on the Flint, the ship itself does very much not quite turn as fast around as it does on the Flint. So it takes a bit longer for her to, move. Okay. The guns, here's where it gets interesting as well. Again, we have 12 127mm guns, very comparable to the Flint's guns. And actually, these are better. So you've got half a second base reload down. You've got an over 10 kilometer range, and you've got a 4% fire chance, which is pretty good, actually. So you pay for that with a turret traverse, as typical for Japanese systems. But 10 degrees per second is not as bad as it sounds, and we get to that in a second here. Torpedoes. Yes, she gets torpedoes. Yes, they are Japanese. No, they're not that much better. In fact, actually, I would say in total they're probably at least on par, if not even a little bit worse, because you only get 2 triple launches compared to the 2 quadruple launches on the Flint. So for an overall strike, and you have, for all intents and purposes, the same range, it's just that they're faster. So 69 knots is obviously a bit on the faster side, and they have a slightly higher flooding chance. But you only get 2 triples, so that is a relatively small torpedo loadout. Let's go over to the AA. You have the exact same AA on the Tokachi that you had on the Flint in the large caliber department. 221, which means that I'm not going to go down the route, but it seems to indicate that the radar director controlled. I'm not sure if the Flint had radar director control, but I would have to check. But I know that some of the destroyers had. Is definitely compared here to the sort of manual tracking that the Japanese had in their guns. So the small caliber AA is completely absent. What does that mean? Well, you do have a worse defensive AA. Actually, you don't. Well, you do, but okay. The difference between the Def AA3 and the Def AA2 is in the small caliber AA. And for the Tokachi, it doesn't matter because she doesn't have any. So on the large caliber AA, it's exactly the same as you have on the Flint. And the concealment is also comparable. The other ship that we need to take a brief look at is the Pan-Asian light cruiser. And yes, the Pan-Asian line should be coming out finally, soonishly. I am very much looking forward to that. And we will see, same Def AA, but just to see how they compare. So again, it's the same guns as on the Flint, because I think it is an Atlanta class. The same to the torpedoes here, again, also the same as on the Flint, but these are deep waters. And the AA is very comparable. So I would say, except for the obvious utility, again, that you have with these ships, because they get fuel smokes and they get torpedo reload boosters, which the Tokachi does not. You could think that you're somewhat disadvantaged here in terms of utility, and you are. This is much more geared to this is not a destroyer hunter. I mean, she can do a lot of damage to destroyers, but she's lacking the utility. The Def AA is kind of nice, but it's not enough to defend yourself from incoming airstrikes, especially if you're up against Tier 8 carriers. And this is much more of a Kiter HE spammer. This is, from playstyle wise, this is much closer to something like the Shores than it is to the Atlantis Flints and other things. So let's actually, before we go into that, there's another thing that I would like to point out. For that purpose, let's go into the training room, and we'll just have a very brief look at how the turrets rotate. Because I haven't actually checked that, but from when I was testing, it felt like that the 10 degrees per second rotation time is not as big of a disadvantage as it feels like. So let us take a look at the angles of the turret. So what I'm curious here is to see where the turrets can go. So now you see we've got the three turret arrangement in the front, with the one in the center being super firing, and we've got a triple turret arrangement in the rear with the same setup. So I've got all turrets pointed. Pointed left side. So we'll switch around, and you will notice that all these turrets can swing around without difficulty, and they don't have to go the long way around. These are, and I don't know if they're fully 360, but I think they are. No, they're not fully 360. I think one of the rear turrets is kind of turning the other way, but as you can see, the 10 degrees per second doesn't actually matter, because the turrets are very quick at getting around. Or are they? Let's try it around the rear section, and it looks like they are all tracking around the rear pretty quickly. Yeah, I think they are all 360-degree turrets. So it doesn't really matter all that much because of the turret layout, and because they can just track around. But let us get to some more details. You can get two elite bonuses, and I think they're both very good. I've tried both and I like both, so it's a difficult choice. You can say this really is just a gunboat. This is a pure Kiter HE spammer, and that's how I'm going to play it. It doesn't really have the utility, and I'm going to boost the guns with reload and traverse speed. Or you're going to say, I'm going to try a little bit more towards the limited utility that I have. I'm giving myself a little AA range boost, a bit more speed, which is very good, because you remember the very slow traverse that these ships have. So having a bit higher speed is a good one. And it also gives you the main battery traverse speed. So you trade 3% reload time for 3% ship speed and 5% AA damage. In terms of camouflage, this is a premium. I don't know if there's a special camo in the Blitz Pass. There might be, but I don't have it. So the historical camo is very interesting, because it gives us range, it gives us torpedo range, it gives us surface detection, as we would expect, but it gives us max traverse speed, which might confuse you a little bit at first, because this means that we are now actually having a longer turn time. Why are we having a longer turn time? Because the traverse speed is actually higher now. She has got a 7 degrees per second traverse speed, which in return reduces the turn time. So that's not a bug. That actually makes sense. But so this makes her a little bit more maneuverable, and that is very much appreciated. Other than that, setup-wise, I am actually in a concealment build, so I am running the high-grade coal here. It's a scout cruiser, lots of guns. I am running the main battery mod 2. The guns get shot off, but you don't get the precision mod, and the alternatives are all not particularly enticing. You could go with slightly faster turret traverse, but honestly, you don't need it because of the turret layout. You could go with the torpedo reload, but why? You only have 2 triple launches. Obviously, propulsion in slot 2 and concealment in slot 3, although you could be tempted to go for speed here as well, or for rudder shift. But then again, the rudder shift is not the problem in this ship. It's the traverse speed, because she is a bit on the sluggish side to actually turn. So even if you're faster in getting the rudder around, the ship still doesn't turn very, very quickly. So that's that. Speed might be an interesting one, together with the elite bonus as well. Commander-wise, given that you have very, very few actual ship skills or utilities that you need to go with, I've got a sort of more standardish scout cruiser setup that I've got here. I do have the AA boosts for what it's worth. I mean, it's not terrible AA, right? But it's not, especially if you're up against lower tier carrier, bottom tier carriers like tier 6 carriers, you can actually make yourself quite useful and help your team out in a pinch, and just do long range fire support. And given the 4% fire chance and the 10-kilometer range on the guns and a 5-second reload, you are actually decently pairable with a carrier as well. Exploit weakness is obviously what you want, and the adrenaline rush is just my choice. You could go with the extinguisher here as well. And there's not an awful lot of skills that you really need down the road. You could probably take the APCS. I don't think the IFHE is going to do absolutely anything on the high explosive side. These guns are pretty good actually on the armor piercing. By the way, if you're fighting destroyers, especially at closer ranges, armor piercing on these guns, especially with the reload, is actually quite devastating. So normally with Japanese guns, you'd say armor piercing is on the meh side, but with these guns are good on the AP, and even against battleships, weak spots at close range if you need to. I mean, you should never be in a position to need to, but if you do, the armor piercing is actually quite devastating. So I think we have covered all the corners here. So let us see her in action a little bit. Now, I don't know, I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on for a minute. I don't know if this is a thing, but I am struggling to get into tier 8 games with this ship. I don't know if that's a premium thing. Tinfoil hat off again, no idea. But I think I've played probably about 10 test battles in this thing, and like somewhere between 10 and 15. And I don't think I've had a single game where I was in a tier 8. So don't know if there is something like preferential matchmaking hidden, but it might just have been coincidence. Anyway, we are on Epicenter, Frozen Shelter, and we are playing against double Nagato, Brooklyn, Budioni, and double Akatsuki. And off we go. Like I said, the battleships can be very devastating against this thing, even more so than against Flints and Atlantis, because of the slightly bigger armor, which seems to be triggering battleship shells more reliably. We are, however, rather quick, and we are going to make our way next to that island and try to stay somewhat hidden. The torpedo angles are great, and the torpedo range is very good as well. So, and the torpedo reload is on the fast side. So you can take a look at the minimap and see. Once I'm in range of that little center island there, I might just send some torpedoes out. Maybe they hit something, because after a while you can sort of predict the path of where enemy ships are going to come at the onset of the battle. So let's just send some torpedoes out. By the time we've seen something to shoot at, they're probably reloaded. And then we'll use that island to shield us. We should be able to outspot anything except for the 2 destroyers. So we can choose our battles. I'm switching to the armor piercing in case one of the destroyers comes around that corner there, because the friendly Akatsuki is going into the center cup, and it is not capturing, which means there's one enemy destroyer in the center ring. And we don't have eyes on him, and it looks like the Akatsuki decides that he does not want to go in there. So if I can't get anything spotted, I can't shoot at it. Plus there's a battleship, so back to the high explosive, and Brooklyn as well. And then we will gently introduce ourselves. Hello, Mr. Brooklyn. And I will drop some torpedoes. It looks like he might be accelerating, but I might be wrong, but we will see. He's turning slightly. And okay, what in the world is this? Back to the armor piercing. Hello, Mr. Akatsuki. What the hell have you been smoking? He's pulling an ergo maneuver. He's basically put his destroyer full speed ahead. It's just going Leroy Jenkins here. Okay, where are you going? I think he dropped all his torpedoes, but I do have to be a little careful because the acceleration is not the greatest, and as such is the deceleration on these ships. I'm not sure if he's got a torpedo launcher ready, but he has disentangled himself from the island and is now very dead, so... Okay, sure, you do you. So we could not quite exploit our initial success here. There's a Nagato, a couple of over-penetrations by the looks of it, but you do have to be careful, especially at closer ranges with these sort of things. So that's a fire on the Nagato. Are you Damaconing? And that would be a negative. Okay, so let's see if we can get another one. And in fact, actually, there's an Akatsuki ahead. And there's also that Brooklyn from earlier. So, well, let's assist with the capture progress. And also, I have just noticed that I am the only one on this flank, and I'm getting shot at by a lot of people. And getting shot at is not something that is very good in this ship, because of the slightly questionable maneuverability on this thing. So, I am trying to not be the closest target to everybody, but make use of my range. Anyway, we're holding the center circles. There's no need for me to suicide. Careful, Akka. There's an enemy Akatsuki just around that corner. You know that, right? Are you aware of that? I hope. Yes, he is aware of that. Okay, he spotted the Akatsuki. Torpedoes out, and that is a very dead Akatsuki. Well done. So now we can go back to the high explosives. Sorry for the noise outside. It is a bit rainy. Sorry, I had to go outside and rescue the laundry. Okay, but back to the battle. Nagato just damaconed a flood, as he would, sensibly. So we'll see if we can get a permafire going on this thing. And this is sort of the style that you there's one. The style that you generally want to play in this ship. You don't want to go in. You don't want to go in hard. Double perma, and he's dead. But you want to make use of your range and make use of your good concealment to pick your battles. It doesn't mean that you can't, you can't play aggressively, but always keep in mind that the maneuverability on this thing is less than ideal. So that's just something you got to compensate for. The other thing that you might notice right now is that if you're going completely bow in or stern in, unlike when you would be on, say, an Atlanta or a Flint, you only get two turrets. You only get two turrets pointing towards the enemy. So you will always have to slightly show a bit more skirt than you would in one of these ships. Especially the Atlanta can actually get a lot of guns forward, and combined with the maneuverability, it makes her really more successful in, say, like a kiting role or a long-range gunnery role. You don't want to get too close, but you do have the long-range torpedoes, and you can compensate for the poor maneuverability at long range by, well, keeping it at long range. Okay, that Bodioni is fortunately shooting high explosive at me, which makes it not a big threat. That Nagato just damaconed a single fire, but honestly, he shouldn't have bothered. So let's just remove the angles from the Bodioni and see if we can get a permafire or two going on the Nagato. But I think he's going to go behind the island. So yeah, he's going to go behind the island. Let's see if we can get some torpedoes off at him. He should be coming around there-ish. Okay, Brooklyn's learned. He's firing armor piercing, so that's actually dangerous. Against something like a Brooklyn, armor piercing not going to do an awful lot unless you're at point blank range. Bodioni probably harmless, firing high explosive around. So at 6 kilometers might be a slightly different story, but again, keep in mind that this thing's got 150s, and and there goes the Nagato, and you've got only 127s. So you definitely do need to be a little careful with these things. Something like a Brooklyn, at a range where your armor piercing would be effective, is actually outgunning you. So that's where you have to resist the temptation of getting all your guns on target. Just tip her over slightly to get three turrets firing, and the gun angles are pretty good. And then if you have a Synop that you can use as a meat shield, then that is also pretty much appreciated. The other thing to note is the relatively good gun arcs. So you can even camp islands and do American light cruiser sort of things. And it's a fun ship to play. It's not without its weaknesses, but it's a fun kind of alternative to the to the Atlantis. So where did we come in the team? Let's take a look. We didn't do an awful lot of fire damage. Oh, we came second, not bad. And highest damage in the battle with an AFK Shinonome on our team, so that worked out. In the second round, we are playing against Hiryu. So yes, that's a carrier battle. Colorado, King George, Helena, Akatsuki, Skåne, and another Akatsuki. This was, I think, actually the very first game I had played in this ship. So I hadn't really figured out yet that the AP is uncharacteristically punchy on these guns. But let's go, and we're playing base capture on Hourglass. So I was probably firing. I think I was firing high explosive exclusively this round, but wouldn't have made a massive difference either. Anyway, Hourglass it is. We are spawning on the left flank, and we will see where the carrier goes. Like I said, the AA is pretty good, but you cannot protect yourself completely from enemy carrier strikes, and the maneuverability and acceleration is distinctly worse than you'd have on the Atlantis, which makes it harder to deal with torpedo drops. But we'll sneak over. We'll kind of sneak over to that island and see what comes down this flank, if anything comes down this flank. Carrier scouts the Carrier doesn't scout at all. Carrier just goes straight ahead. But to his credit, seems to be going for the destroyers, which is nice. And maybe, I don't know. And we have managed to evade being air spotted. So I can push up a little further because the enemy team doesn't yet know that I'm coming. And while I'm not being able to outspot the destroyers, I probably have a relatively nasty surprise for them if they do tend to come around. We can use that island as torpedo protection. Again, keep in mind the lack of utility. You don't have a radar, you don't have a sonar, you don't have a fuel smoke or anything. Okay, I'm spotted, so there is a destroyer here, which means I'm immediately dropping speed. And yes, there's the Akatsuki. And here I obviously should have been using armor piercing. It's not that the high explosive is that much worse, and it does get the job done at close ranges as well, but you do get the occasional semi-pen. And I'm now coming under fire from the Colorado, who instantly takes out my torpedo launcher. Fortunately, he takes out the torpedo launcher that I don't need right now, so I can turn away and obviously get out of here, because not because of the Akatsuki, who is not sailing into my torpedoes, but the Colorado might. But because of the Colorado, obviously. So, and I am also now getting attention from the carrier, being the closest target. That's a relatively obvious choice. And a couple more. I've got fire on the Aka. I am starting to shoot planes down. Double fire from the airstrike. That I can Damakon and use the first heal. And Akatsuki probably wants to go undetected, but he's sailing in straight lines, so that is not a big problem. And that is a very, very dead Akatsuki. And next up is probably that Colorado, who I think has taken a torpedo, but I don't think he was flooding. So right now we're out of things to shoot at for the moment, and it looks like the carrier is now busy elsewhere. As you can see, we've shot four planes down out of the strike with the def AA up. That's not monstrous. And there's the Colorado. That is not monstrous, so yeah, be aware, you are not a dedicated AA cruiser in any way. And you don't want to get close to the Colorado, because you don't need to. You've got very, very good gun angles, and the Colorado isn't paying attention. And you've got torpedoes that can perfectly fine reach that thing. Okay, now he's paying attention. Single fire, Damakon. There goes the Damakon. So that's not going to set a fire, but from here on out, it's permafire and permaflood potentially, because I've already got the torpedoes away. And that's kind of similar to how you would play the European destroyers. That's kind of where you're doing your damage. It's one torpedo hit, and that's a permaflood, and that's a permafire. So that Colorado is now not a happy camper. Okay, there comes the Skåne. And I have taken a little bit of damage. I am now too close to the Colorado, so I do need to turn around, which takes a little bit of time, but he's now on triple permafire and permaflood, so while he is shooting at me, it's not doing an awful lot, and I've got the torpedoes out, and I don't think he's learned that I have torpedoes just yet, so I can turn around the other side. Yeah, that's a dead Colorado, and start shooting at the Skåne. Again, I should have been using the armor piercing here, especially at this range, because that Colorado is just going to die to my torpedoes. There it goes. while taking down one of my gun turrets. That is normal. With the reload mod, you do lose your gun turrets. But Scorner goes undetected, so wisely so. So second salvo out, but I don't think I can hit him. And the carrier is coming back my way. So I'm already slowing down, anticipating some Scorner torpedoes. And there is also a King George, while I now have to deal with carrier torpedo bomber strikes. So I do need to build up some speed and see that I can get out of here. And let's see if we can fool the carrier at least a little bit. I've got the defensive A up, but I think the first strike is gonna hit, but I might be able to outrun the second one, which means I do get to survive. And yeah, I've shot one aircraft down out of that torpedo strike, so with defensive AA up. So yeah, you're not an AA cruiser. If you're alone, that's not gonna go well. Okay, so King George, I think, has damage controlled something. Torpedoes, but he's gonna dodge those torpedoes, which means I'm already gonna turn around and see if I can get another torpedo drop out in the other direction. And he has seen me, and that high explosive is actually relatively dangerous. Not as dangerous as it is against, say, something like an Atlanta, because it can't over-penetrate. Against me, probably with a slightly bigger armor piercing would be the better choice. But he's now on double permafire by the looks of it, and I have run out of map, but I think my torpedoes are taking... Yep, torpedoes got him. Which only leaves... I'm out of heals, and that Akatsuki is coming dangerously close to our base, so I'm gonna head back there. There's still that Scorner out there somewhere. Let's see if we can get him killed, get a couple of airplanes shot down, because again the carrier is focusing me down. There's the Scorner, and yeah, like I said, I am completely out of heals at this point. I've been fighting non-stop, but the Scorner takes out our Caracciolo, which is very unfortunate. I would have loved to have that SAP against that thing, but it does go undetected because he's not an idiot. And there comes that carrier again. So obviously, I'm once again busy dealing with incoming airstrikes. I am taking some fire. I think that was the Helena, so he must be over there somewhere beyond the islands. But I've got bigger problems right now, because there comes the carrier airstrike, and that's coming after me. So slammer in reverse, full hard turn right into the torpedoes, dodge the first one, and then full speed ahead again and see if we can dodge the second one as well. All the while keeping up fire at the enemy Helena. There come the Scorner torpedoes, so I need to slow down again and break that out. But I'm on 4,000 hit points. I had to Damacon the fire, and I'm being shot at by a Helena and a Scorner. And then the carrier takes out the Helena, but I'm down to 2,500 hit points, and I think I'm going to lose that gunfight. The problem is I can't go undetected against the Scorner. I can get one more torpedo drop off on a Hail Mary, but I'm also being torpedo dropped by the carrier, and there's absolutely nothing I can do at this point. So, yeah, 95,000 points of damage, 3 kills, 12 planes shot down, basically being under constant air attack by the carrier, and it still wasn't enough. Oh well. Sometimes games go like that. But yeah, is this a fun ship? Yes, this is absolutely a fun ship. It's kind of like a Flint or an Atlanta, but with a slightly different slant on it. The 1% extra fire chance and the slightly extra range on the guns, plus the 360 turrets, makes it actually really, really fun to use as a fire starter in combination with the higher flooding chance on the torpedoes. Although you do get one top less, so it's probably about the same. But you do have to compensate for the maneuverability or lack thereof. And don't be fooled into thinking that you're an AA cruiser, because you're not. Because your complete absence of small caliber AA means that you're going to be struggling to shoot planes down just with the large caliber AA. But this is a fun ship. So if you always wanted a Japanese flavored Flint with less utility but more fire chancey things and more just long range kiting capabilities. If you enjoy the shores, that's a ship. This is a ship for you, absolutely. So, yeah, there we are. And that's it for me today. Thanks, everybody. And sorry for the interruptions. I did have to deal with weather-related things. I'm going to edit that out as much as I can. But if you notice some weird pauses in the video, that's because I had to stop recording and go and deal with weather. And that's it for me today. Thanks, everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.